Welcome and thank you for joining me as we take a closer look at the Hallmark Keepsakes that I chose to add to my collection in 2024. Starting with this year's addition to the Beauty of Birds collection, with a violet and green swallow. This piece has 3 distinct paint finishes, with the white of the belly, the purple of the middle of the wing, and the black of the tip of the wing being a matte finish. And then there's the blue of the wing and the tail, which is a mattified metallic finish. And a similar mattified metallic finish is used as the gold detailing. Each wing contains 3 different size rhinestones, and this ornament, unlike most of the rest we'll see today, came with a ribbon hanger. Every year what hangs below the bird changes. This year we have a twisted gold stem and a white flower with a purple centre. My biggest complaint about this ornament is that each pocket of colour doesn't have a nice crisp edge, and it bleeds together a bit with the gold running right around. Having said that, the gold that does run around is actually raised quite significantly and adds a nice dimensionality to this whole piece. I think this one's really sweet, and I love the way they all look together with all their different designs and colours hanging in my cupboard. Up next is Stellar's Jay, which is a miniature ornament similar to the Beauty of Birds collection. These follow a similar model to the Beauty of Birds, where every year certain elements of this ornament will change, but the size and general proportions stay the same. This year's variant on the dangle is 3 blueberries and what appear to be 2 holly leaves, but don't really ask me, I'm an Australian and I've never actually seen holly before. My critique first, and it's the same for the other bird, it's just not very crisp around the edges where the silver meets the paint. Having said that, I absolutely love the colour on this, and especially the tail gives me very stained glass vibes. This multitonal bluebird also features a rhinestone almost in a swirl eye at the top of its wing. And as with all of my birds, one of my favourite views is actually top down, which once it's hanging you don't really ever get to see again. But there's something about the almost symmetricality of it that just scratches that itch in my brain for a moment. Up next is the Mute Swan, and this isn't associated with the Beauty of Birds collection, but I think they blend in fabulously together. Once again with a metallic finish on this one's decorations, but I want to say it's rose gold or copper instead of the other ones being gold and silver. The metallic finish is carried over to the beak, which is nicely offset by dark brown surrounds. The colours on this one are a white and light cream through to a very pale yellow. And I think the transition is very nice, and I actually don't have the same complaints, probably because the colours are so pale. Where the yellow is painted, I would say it's a much more matte finish, whereas the white and light cream lean towards a satin or pearly finish. The diamantes that run along the middle of the wings are what I would call an AB, or Aurora Borealis finish, so they shift sort of metallic-y rainbow as you shift it around. And as an added bonus, I really like the way they've kind of animated the grass, almost like the swan swimming through and parting the reeds. And we have a Gumdrop greeting, which is part of the Petite Penguins collection, which are all miniatures. This cute little guy has a blue scarf and seems to be showing off his new Gumdrop, which is almost the size that he is. My only real complaint is that glitter, and the fact that it's going to give a real sugar-covered Gumdrop a run for its money in how messy it can be. Stepping now to our first holiday-themed ornament with Hoppy Halloween, and Hallmark is currently denoting their Halloween collection by switching the red on the boxes for black. As for the subject matter of this beer Stein, I'm going to have to ask for some guidance. As an Australian, I'm not sure if there's a pumpkin-headed horseman as a legend, or if this is just referring to part of the legend of the Headless Horseman and adding some pumpkins on top. So I think we have to start with the pumpkin base, which morphs into the handle. I just think the shapes and patterns get a little smooshed. Surprising to myself, next on the list is actually going to be the purple bats. They're kind of cool, but also kind of unremarkable compared to everything else that's still going on here. Next is going to be the actual scene of the beer stein. I love the way they've sort of shoved the black into the carvings so that they really stand out. Perhaps the orange head and the orange moon are a bit too close together, but having said that, it really makes it stand out that our creepy pumpkin man is also holding a beer stein. And for me, tied for the top is literally the top, as I think that the lid and the hinge do warrant being two separate pieces. I love the brighter, glowy, matte metallic finish of the silver lid, which leads us to the really cool sculpted hinge, and the details here are just nuts. With our pumpkin head rider featured again, and depending on whether the lid is down or up, he's doing some pretty amazing things on that horse. My only complaint about this one is a bit more of a physical issue, where when you lift the lid, it's actually a little loose in the hinge. I doubt this will be a problem, but it's something to be aware of. As the top of the box shows us, here we have the fourth in the Gnome for Christmas series, simply named Gnome for Christmas. I love that in this little ornament you can see so much personality and have a good guess to the kind of day they've had. The only real issue with this ornament is that there's a high point underneath, which means it doesn't sit level. But because the base is so wide, it doesn't seem inclined to tip over either. It's also a surprisingly sturdy ornament. I was worried that the lights were going to be attached to some sort of flexible wire and it would end up wearing out over time, but everything seems really well attached and quite strong. There are a couple of places you can find fault with the paintwork, sort of around the overall edges and around the red cap and stuff like that, but I think where it counts, sort of in the face and everything, it's a really cute ornament. And on to number 13 in the Holiday Lighthouse series, which again is just named Holiday Lighthouse. So I guess giving them a distinctive name isn't something that carries through all collections. Size-wise, this one's heading towards our most substantial ornament for the year. And this is our first ornament from this review that requires a separate power cord. Its official name is Keepsake Power Cord, and it's brought separately. This whole process is easier than it used to be, because these new Keepsake power cords come with an Australian variant, so we're able to use them straight out of the box. This ornament doesn't have an additional go button, as you'll see with some of our other powered ornaments, and that's because its power feature is just to run the lighthouse. And I love the attention to detail that when it's plugged in, we get a cool white light for the lighthouse, and a warm light for the living area. The only thing is it doesn't seem that the lights under the flat roof light up at all. Overall, this is a simple ornament executed really well, and my only complaint is this really fine glitter that will get everywhere. This is the only one that's not a quote-unquote keepsake, so this is what we refer to as a red box, which is a little confusing that since their new boxes essentially look like this minus the cutouts. If you have a bit of an eye for finishes and details, I would put a bit of a buyer beware sticker on these red box ornaments. They're not all created equal, or painted equal, I should say. Even the same ornaments won't have the same finishes, and this year one of our family friends got one that didn't even have a back, sort of more like a magnet. Now that may matter to you, and it may not, but it is just something to keep an eye on. His sculpted detail is about as much as I think you need for a stitch. Unfortunately, some of the paintwork does let him down, especially I think where the blue gets on scrump. It's not my favourite. And unfortunately, I am the sort of person that now that I've noticed that the pink and blue of Stitch's ears sort of wobbles together, I'll probably never unsee that. But he is really cute, and especially the different price point, I think he's still well worth it. And straight on to this year's keepsake stitch, which is Sun-Kissed Stitch. For a Stitch figure, his sandcastle chair makes him a more hefty ornament, but I do think both in the carving and the paint job they've done a really good job on the sandcastle chair. I do find on this one there's a couple of seams that are catching my eye, but really that is me nitpicking because they're on tone and you really don't see them unless you're looking for something to pick on. I think they did a great job on the claws on both of his hands, and I'm always impressed when they bother to put detail on something that's going to be hidden. So when you tilt it back you can see they've still sculpted and painted his eyes really well. And this Stitch doesn't seem to suffer the way the previous one did with the wandering ear borders either. And on to a minis twin pack featuring Merida and Snow White. Especially on human character figures, my make or break is often the face, but these are so itty bitty they do get a bit of a pass. And there are still amazing amounts of detail in these ornaments. We will have another look at the feet, but for now I will just say itty bitty. For Merida, I love the texture they've gotten into her hair and her sassy stance, and also a bit of layering for the fabric, which I believe is so shiny because the paint job is probably a transfer to still be able to get some tartan detail without having to painstakingly paint it. But again, something this small, if it works, go for it. The embroidery along the bottom of her dress does read a little muddled to me, but again, at the scale of it, I'm not really complaining. With this Merida, even though her feet are quite small, thankfully she's standing flat-footed and quite balanced, which hopefully means that there's not much risk of her feet being snapped off, and potentially with just a little blue tack or something similar, you would be able to stand her up even though these are both fairly well hanging ornaments. Snow White's face is a little squidgy looking, but again being so small I am giving that one a pass. They've actually bothered to make the red bits on Snow White's sleeves puff out more than the blue, which I thought was amazing but probably not even necessary given how small it is. And Snow White's itty bitty feet do stick out further, which I think makes them more prone to being snapped off, so I would use extra caution there just to protect her tiny toots. And on to Vanellope's car from Ralph Breaks the Internet. This is a sweet ride. This isn't my favourite Disney movie, but when I saw the detail that was in this ornament, I knew it had to join my collection. And also, try not to see a sad face at the front of the car. Again, they've managed to capture something mid-motion, and to me it looks like she's whipping around a corner. And again, for something of an odd dimension, she hangs quite well. The sprinkles look like they're either transfers or decals, but I think they get a pass because everything else is so detailed. Like the chocolates having lumpy moments, and the berry squiggle is actually raised up. And the biscuits used for the tyres don't remind me of any particular biscuit, but let me know if you've seen them before. The patterns on the biscuits are actually raised the way they should be, and the bends for the straws are actually ribbed. I also love the look and feel of the cream fillings for the wheels. And the embossing on the back wheels matches left from right. And coincidence or not, the designs for the front are both flat. And I think that Vanellope is one of the main things that sells this ornament as being mid-motion. And it's not just her face and her eyeline, but the fact that they've got her hair whipping out sideways behind her. Just telling you need a power cable, and you'll be glad you did. For Disney's The Little Mermaid 35th Anniversary Edition. And especially being electric, this is another of our chunky ornaments. And especially Ariel, even though the way she's sort of only held on by her tail, feels quite secure in there as well. So I think it'll hold up to a lot of admiration, maybe a little playing, and also that go button is very tempting. I love that even though it's such a small set piece, you still know exactly when and where they are. It isn't a particularly elegant hanger, but I think this one's more designed for standing anyway. The wood grain and boards are really well done, as well as the porthole and the little flander butt. The power cable is a fairly small pin, and I don't find them terribly easy to insert, but it's also not that bad. But probably easier for adult fingers. With just the power connected, the rippling light effect bounces up onto Ariel and the ship wall, and slowly rolls through a couple of different patterns and light colours. And when you press the button, the lights ripple in time with Ariel singing part of your world. And here it is.
I want to be where the people are. I want to see them dancing, walking around on those, what do you call them? Oh, feet. Flipping your fins, you don't get too far. Legs are required for jumping, dancing, strolling along down a, what's that word again? Street. Up where they walk, up where they run, up where they stay all day in the sun, wandering free. Wish I could be part of that world.
As for the closer details, I do think the fork maybe looks a little dinky considering it's almost the third character. And at some angles, it looks like Ariel's head's been popped off a bit like a Barbie, and her head almost looks dissociated from her neck. And props again for the actual texture of the ship and the seagrass. Another honourable mention for the Flounderbot. So far I think he is one of the most flawless characters I've seen. And they've actually textured Ariel's tail, even the parts that we're not really going to see. And they've given her a belly button, and some texture for the clamshell bra. I actually think this may be one of my favourite ornaments this year, for detail, execution and storytelling. And when you look straight down at it, you can see through the water ripple to the mechanics below. Now for the most part, this will be at the angle that most of this is camouflaged, or the ripple is so shiny that you can't see in there at all. And just a little peek at where the magic's coming from. And on to Jasmine and Rajah from Disney's Aladdin. And I'll be completely honest, I totally got this one just for cute baby Rajah. And he's totally lived up to my hype, for me. He is super cute, and kind of makes me want to give him little scritches. And I really enjoyed Jasmine's sculpt too. There's just something about her face that puts me off a little. At certain angles I find it looks a little triangle-y. Again, she's not really a stander, but you could certainly maybe fight with some blue tack or have her leaning somewhere. But for something that is a fairly plain costume, they have managed to sneak in a few details, including the gathering around the bottom of her trousers, and some flow and texture in for her hair. For the most job, I think the painting here is pretty good. There are a couple of spots again with the edges where we've got some bleeding, but especially with an ornament this simple, there's not really anywhere to hide. She is also very close to being part of the Itty Bitty Feet Club, so just be a little cautious of that. And we're off for a practically perfect carousel ride for Mary Poppins' 60th anniversary. It does look to me a little like she should be labelled for from the new movie, but it's just a choice in art style. Unfortunately, you're not getting this pair to stand vertically as intended, but you do get a relatively solid feeling lean out of them. And we have a very polite Mary Poppins sitting side saddle on her carousel horse, which features flowers, a lovely shade of purple, and some gold scroll work. Now, unlike our birds earlier, this gold scroll work is just painted on, so there's no additional texture. There is a little bit of a sculpted differentiation for the hooves, mane and tail, but mostly we're saving our details for Mary Poppins herself. And for Mary's details, you can see that we've got a ruffled fullness in her dress and some texture on her bodice. There's also a little texture for the bows around the bottom of her dress. And they've sculpted in her gloves, some movement in the back of her shirt, and also around her bonnet. And again, for an almost hidden detail, they've gone to the extent of creating her a bun. I do wish on the dress the red was a little more crisp and precise, but I think they've done an amazing job painting her face. And I'm not sure if it's just mine that has a glitch, but there's a funny pink spot on the hoof and a little random spot on the tail. And we have Miguel and Dante from Disney and Pixar's Coco. And don't forget his guitar, because spoiler alert, I'm going to be talking about it a lot because that's where most of the impressive detail is. But the two main stars first. And as we're coming to expect, they've done an amazing job with some movement and wrinkles in Miguel's clothing, and also down towards his hips on Dante. And they've perfectly nailed that derpy look on Dante's face. It's reasonably heavy for the size of it, so it did have a bit of a pendulum effect. It didn't feel like it sat quite flat, but it's still quite secure. I did notice on wrestling it out of the box that the guitar neck is quite flexible, so this would be the place I would be cautious about causing any damage. And after noticing that, I wanted to check the thin limbs and tail on Dante, but he feels like extremely solid plastic and they didn't flex at all. I may be wrong, but to my eye, Miguel does look a little on the orange side for his skin tone. Once again, they've done an amazing job painting the faces. My only real critique on this one is that for a person wearing clothes and a dog with fur, they may be a little shiny. And we segue for the second half of this clip for me to point out all the amazing details on this guitar. Starting with the fact that they bothered to cut out the cutouts on the top, and that even on the back, there's texture for the duct tape. The nose and teeth seem to just be a decal, but we're starting to talk tiny detail here. Not only are the frets and strings silver, but they're also textured. And again, I think the scrolly artwork is a decal or a transfer, but the detail here is so impressive it just gets one big tick. Thank goodness those power cords come with a few plugs, for this always there to guide you Disney Lion King 30th anniversary ornament. Unfortunately, I am going to have to rank it probably significantly below the Little Mermaid one. The details are a little lacking, and I think the electrical is much less impressive. There is something satisfying though about that clean matte back. And he does also hang quite well. You can see that up close those stars just look like tiny bubbles in the background resin. I'm not sure if there was a problem with my ornament, the power cable, or user error, but I did have quite a hard time getting this one to lock in properly. It kept wanting to stop mid-replay. The just plugged in mode here is supposed to have the stars slowly blinking. And when you press the go button, the stars flash in time with the speech of Simba and Mufasa.
Dad, we're pals, right?
Right.
And we'll always be together, right?
Simba, let me tell you something that my father told me. Look at the stars. The great kings of the past look down on us from those stars.
Really?
Yes. So whenever you feel alone, just remember that those kings will always be there to guide you. And so will I.
And here so you can better see what the pulsing to the speech is supposed to look like.
Dad, we're pals, right?
Right.
Unfortunately, even in person, this wasn't the most obvious effect. On to Kevin decks the halls from the Minions. Well, because he's a minion. Again, we've had a little trouble keeping a crisp paint line, especially between high contrast colours like the black and yellow. The eyes, though, I think look absolutely fabulous. In this minion we get sound without needing a power cable. Just a chunky big battery panel in his back. He hangs quite well but ends up looking like he's trying to do ballet or fly. And we get treated to a Minions language version of Deck the Halls when you press the button. Physically speaking, he's not the most stable minion, so I would expect that every time his button gets pressed he'll get knocked over. Doing a bit of a snappability test on Kevin, and the stockings hanging off his arms are attached with ribbons, so they should be okay. And surprisingly, his little hair stalks are quite rubbery, so I think they'll be okay too for a while. I know there's not a whole lot to work on a minion, but they have at least given him a proper hole for his mouth, and put a lot of work on those mischievous eyes. The picture on his jumper is just a decal as well, but that's actually maybe right on brand as well because so are a lot of ours. Overall, this isn't my favourite minion song, but I think he's a fairly sturdy minion. And we're into Madame Malkin's Robes for All Occasions from the Harry Potter series. This one's only feature is that it's designed to be lit up from the inside, so there's a spot on the back for your Christmas tree lights. Surprisingly, I think this is going to be number 2 for me this year. There is some texture and colour variant to the bricks, but considering how much of this design is bricks, I feel like they maybe could have given us a little bit more. Strangely enough, for something that is so square, it doesn't quite seem to hang level. I love the choice in purple colour, but unfortunately I think because there's such a similar tone, it makes the cursive gold writing even harder to read. Even though it's probably completely accurate to the sources, the sides and back really don't have much to say for themselves on this ornament. This sign is kinda super hard to read, but the details around the sign are really nice and just add to the overall effect that this would be a real shop. When you get right in and down, the details on the exterior of this layer of the building are quite impressive. I love the seashells in the arches above the doors, and those super tiny knockers. I love the big scissors above the door as well, just to really hit home where you're going. And to me, that's how I'd know which door I had to go through. Now, obviously the figures are super tiny in the windows, and the detail's just not quite there on them, which I can't blame them for being behind glass as well. But they definitely still get the message across. For these ornaments, I use battery-powered LED Christmas lights. And this is where my big complaint comes in for this ornament. The windows are so clear, and there's nothing behind, that you can literally see the naked light bulb. And this is my attempt to either hide or at least disguise that naked light bulb. I ended up going with 2 layers of the white tape just to give me the best chance to conceal these bright little bulbs. And because of the size of these ornaments, and the fact that these lights aren't that strong, I usually use a few, depending on sort of what we're working with. And also a little note, please don't stick tape to lights that are actually going to get hot. And if you have more of a traditional Christmas tree light like the socket for this allows for, then your results are going to look quite different anyway. So for ease of removal and also for jiggling things around a little bit, I never push the cables all the way in. So then once you've got them all shoved in, you're able to give them a wiggle and a poke a bit further in to get them a bit more positioned, and that's how I had some up the top and then some down a bit further. It still doesn't look perfect, but I think it looks kind of funky. And now for a miniature ornament, Cakey Cat from Gabby's Dollhouse. This is a cute little miniature ornament, mostly purchased because my niece and nephew like Gabby's Dollhouse. The white frosted parts are slightly shiny, but I think that's because it's not a fully mattified plastic. And the coloured wrapper as well as the other details seem to be a matte finish paint. I do quite enjoy the rippled sort of tie-dye effect of the wrapper, and their cute little marshmallow looking arms and legs. The ribbing detail on the wrapper is quite deep and well made. The eyes and nose were actually raised before they were painted, whereas the mouth was just sort of decaled on. And the sprinkles that make up her whiskers and stripes are also raised to look like actual sprinkles. Overall, quite a cute little mini ornament. Onto the Dutton Ranch from Yellowstone. The base on this one is the biggest we've had so far, so make sure you've got room in your collection. I thought it was a little bit of a missed opportunity because All of the windows and everything are fully opaque, so even if you wanted to, there's no sort of getting a light in here to make it light up. But the build quality is quite impressive. It feels really sturdy but not too heavy. All the textures and details are raised where you'd expect them to be, and everything seems quite crisply painted. There's a little bit of funny colour around the edge of the snow, but I do wonder if that's not intentional. I think this is another case of a simple but well executed ornament. And if you're a Yellowstone fan, then this is a nice subtle piece of memorabilia. And we're at the end with Bag End from Lord of the Rings. Again, nothing much happening on the back of this one, but I do quite enjoy the texture and change of tones. The bench seat sitting out the front is really the only thing sticking out, but somehow this piece feels so dimensional. Unfortunately, from the sides, the joining of the pieces does stand out quite a bit, but it's sort of less noticeable or looks more intentional from the front. And because it is a battery operated ornament, you don't get the lights always on sort of feature, but when you do press the button, you get the lights come on and flicker in time to a conversation between Bilbo and Gandalf.
No, thank you! We don't want any more visitors, well-wishers, or distant relations.
And what about very old friends? Gandalf? Bilbo Baggins.
Dear Gandalf!
Good to see you. I'm 111 years old. Who would believe it? You haven't aged a day.
Come on, come in! Welcome, welcome.
The flowers and things in the garden are maybe a little blobby looking. That would probably be where I would mark this down. But I think everything else is so fabulous that if that's where you're looking first, then you're doing a me and trying to look for the problems.
No, thank you! We don't want any more visitors, well-wishers, or distant relations.
And really, I think I might have to say that this one comes in equal favourite for me for everything I brought from this year. Thank you so much for watching. Please like, share and subscribe. And leave me a comment about what was your favourite ornament, or if you had another favourite ornament that you purchased in 2024.